Okay, we begin the Gemara today on Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph, where it says Amalei Abaye, 5 lines from the top of the Yamud. So this is the middle of a sugya discussing what it said in the Mishnah. The Mishnah said that Rabbi Akiva says that there's a concept called Heter Mitztaref LeIsser, which means that if you have wine, which a Nazir is not allowed to drink, and that wine was absorbed in bread, so now you have a half a kazayas from the wine, a half a kazayas from the bread. So together we combine it to the full amount of a kazayas, and that you'd be chayiv malchus if the Nazir ate from that. That was the chiddush of Rabbi Akiva. And the Gemara said it's learned out from the pasuk mishras. Mishras means you soak the bread into wine, and that's aser. And the discussion of the Gemara was: is this concept applied only by a Nazir, or in other places as well? Rabbi Yochanan says that this is only by a Nazir, and on that there was a long discussion in the Gemara. And Abaye tried to prove from different places that this concept of heter mitztaref le'isser is not only by a Nazir, that it's by other Yisurim in the Torah as well. And Rav Dimi refuted all of his proofs, and he showed no, that this inyan of heter mitztaref le'isser is only regarding a Nazir. So now the Gemara brings the continuation of the discussion, what Abaye asked on this. Amalei Abaye. So Abaye said to Rav Dimi that said over this halacha from Rabbi Yochanan, Mimai, the high mishras, how do you know that this extra word of mishras anovim, that it says over there by the Nazir, leheter mitztaref le'isser, that it's coming to teach us this concept that when you have a half a kazayas of the isser and a half a kazayas of the heter, that we combine them to the isser, huda, so that's what it's coming to teach. Dilme, maybe it's coming to teach a completely different halach and a completely different chiddush. Litain tam ki ikru da aser. Maybe it's coming to teach me the halacha that when you have a taste of the isser, that it's aser just like the ikr itself, just like the isser itself. One of the examples for this is what the Gemara brings later here. Let's say you have grapes that were soaked in water, and then you take out the grapes from the water. But now the water has a very strong taste from these grapes. So even though you don't have actual mamoshes of the grapes anymore in the water, there's nothing tangible of the grapes left in the water, but there's a strong taste of the grapes in the water. So that's called a tam. Tam, and the tam would be aser just like the ikr itself. Maybe that's what it's coming to teach when the Torah writes the lashon of mishras, when if you soak grapes in water or something like that. But how do you know it means that you can be mitzad of something which is completely heter? That's a much bigger chiddush. To be mitzad of heter issa means, let's say you took the example of soaking the piece of bread. Let's talk about that example for a second. If you soak the piece of bread in wine, the chiddush over here is, it's not only in a case where you soak the entire piece of bread and wine. If you soak the entire piece of bread and wine, so then every part of the bread has the taste of the wine in it. There is no part of heter from the bread that doesn't have the taste of wine. So then that would be like tam ki'ikir. But the chiddush of when you soak the bread and wine, that the heter is mitztaref le'isser, let's say you only soaked half of the bread and wine. And then there's that half of bread is only a half a kazayas. And then there's the other half of the bread, which was not soaked in the wine, which is another half a kazayas. So Rabbi Akiva says if you eat the whole bread together, it's going to be aser. The heter is mitztaref le'isser, even if there is no taste of the wine in a part of the bread. So what Abaye is asking is, maybe we should say that this whole concept, this pasuk of mishras, is teaching me regarding the halacha of tam ke'ikr, when you have the tam there, fully in the whole water that you're drinking, or in the whole bread. Even if you don't, well, the chiddush here is, even if you don't have the ikr, you don't have the mamoshes, but still the tam itself will be aser like the ikr. Maybe that's what it's teaching me. So now the Gemara stops on this and asks, how is Abaye himself asking this question? It's interesting. One of the Rishonim say, Rabbeinu David. This whole sugi we have here is very similar to the Gemara here is in the Gemara of Psachim. Same discussion. So over there, Rabbeinu David says that this next question in the Gemara is not really part of the Amoraim in the Gemara. The Rabbanan Svarai, which were a generation after the Amoraim, they added in this piece here. Now, Abaye, what they asked is, it's very funny because Abaye meikar kakashile. In the beginning, what was his question? He asked on Rav Dimi, how could you, Rav Dimi, say that this halacha of heter being mitztaref le'isser only applies to a Nazir and not anywhere else? And he asked him a bunch of questions that it seemingly you find it in other places as well. He asked him all these questions. And now Hada Amalei, and now is it possible that afterwards he came and said, Litein tam ke'ikir, that maybe there's no such a halacha of heter mitztaref le'isser, not even by a Nazir, and it's just maybe coming to teach me a different halacha of tam ke'ikir? It's sort of a contradiction here. First, Abaye is asking that this concept of heter mitzvah of lister should be in kol ha'Torah kula. And now he's asking the opposite, that even by a Nazir, maybe there is no union of heter mitzvah of lister here either. So the Gemara answers, Basar Deshani Lei, after he answered, Rav Dimi answered all of his questions, that you can't say that heter mitzvah of lister applies in other places besides Nazir. So Amalei, now Rav Dimi Abaye that is, came back and asked, so Dil Militan Tam Kikir. So now he said, if so, I have a different opposite question for you. That maybe here by Nazir itself, there's no such a thing of heter mitzvah of lister. Maybe it's just teaching me the concept of that the tam is also like the it's a hudasa, that's what it comes for. And the Gemara here brings a braisa that actually clearly says this. Look at the Tanya, as the braisa says, the Rishonim say Abaye himself didn't quote this braisa, but the Gemara is bringing this braisa that proves Abaye's question. So the braisa says Mishras. What is the word Mishras teaching? Litain tam ki'ikir. That the taste is also just like the ikir itself. And that means Shem Shara Novim B'mayim, you soak grapes in water, and V'yesh Bem Tam Yayin, even after you take out the grapes, the water itself has the taste of the grapes. Chayiv. Yechayiv, the Nazir, if he drinks from that water, it has the taste in it, Yechayiv for that. And then the Braisa adds, Umikan Atadon, from here we learn out as well, L'chal Yisurim Sheb'Torah, that the same applies to all other Yisurim in the Torah, that in all other Yisurim as well, the Tam is also just like the Ikir. And the Braisa says it's actually a Kal V'chomer. Uma Nazir, if by a Nazir, She'ein Yisurei Issa Olam. The Isser of a Nazir is not an Isser that lies in the person forever. Person accepts upon himself Naziris for whatever amount of time. And the Ein Isurei Isserano. The Isser of a Nazir is not an Isser of benefit, that he may not have any benefit from these grapes. He's not allowed to eat it. And the Yashatil Isurei. A third leniency is that there's a heta for this Isser. Even while he is a Nazir, he can request a heta for it. But nevertheless, even though you have all these leniencies, also by Tam Ke'ikir, the Torah writes the word Mishras to teach me that the taste is also like the Ikir itself. So now, Kalaya Kerem, an example of another Isser, Kalayim. If you have something that grew in a vineyard that was mixed together with vegetables and other things, so this is Kalayim. Sheisuran Isailam. So what grew there is also forever. Visuran Isana. And this is a Isser, you're not allowed to have any benefit of it. And the Ein Heter Yisuram. And there is no way, even while it is also, there's no way to get any Heter for this. So it's a much more stringent Isser. Ein Edin Sheyasa by Tam Kikir. Most definitely that you should apply the same halacha of Tam Kikir. So that's the Kal V'chomer we learn out from here. The Rishonim say that the Gemara is bringing the example of Klaya Kerem, but it's also other Yisurim as well. I mean, the Brayser actually itself spells out one other Isser as well that this applies to. V'hu adin la'arla. And I could learn out the same thing with a Kal V'chomer to Arla. And the Gemara says B'shtayim. Regarding Arla, I only have a Kal V'chomer with 2 points. The Gemara just before, when it compared Nazir to Klaya Kerem, it said that Klaya Kerem is more stringent than Nazir with 3 points. Right? It's the fact that it's a Isser Olam, the fact that there's that it's Ein Heteli Surai, and that it's also Bahano. When it comes to Arla, the Gemara says that the Chumra is only with 2 points. Why only 2 points? So there's a few pshatim here in the Rishonim. In the Mefarish, he says the reason why it's only 2 points is because you can't say regarding the Isser of Arla that it's a Isser Olam, because after 3 years it's going to be mutter. The tree becomes mutter. Okay, but Tosfos disagrees with that because Tosfos says the actual fruits that grew within the first 3 years are also forever. True, the tree itself in the 3rd year, the fruit after the 3rd year or after the 4th year when there's neter avai, the fruits that it produces will be mutter, but l'chayra, those fruits that it did produce before are going to be also forever. So Tosfos says that when the Gemara here says that it's only 2 chumris that it has, why only 2? Because it does have a heta for its isser. If you talk about the peiros that grow in the 4th year, they're also to eat wherever you want, but if you bring them to Yerushalayim, you're allowed to eat it there. So the Gemara is referring to the 4th year. Okay, that's one shot that Tosfos brings. There's another shot that Tosfos brings. True, it's not yet Arla. So from Tosfos, it's mashma. It's mashma from Tosfos that the neter avai of the 4th year is really also Arla, but with a heter. That's what it's mashma taka from Tosfos here. The Gemara is saying that this halacha of tam ke'ikir we learn out from the word mishras, and we compare from here, or we make a kal v'chomer from here, that this applies to all the other yisurim in the Torah as well. Okay, so the Gemara's question is, why is Abaya's question was, why are we saying that we learn out from Mishras to say that by Nazir there's a different concept? That we learn out heter mitzaref l'isser, even bigger chiddush, that I could combine something which is completely mutter to the isser. So the Gemara answers, so one of the Rabbanon there answered Abaya's question, and he said as follows: Rabba, which was the one that quoted Rabbi Yochanan to say that we learn out this halacha from Mishras that heter is mitzaref l'isser. Kikama, according to whose opinion did he say this? Rabbi Akiva. He was saying this to explain Rabbi Akiva's opinion in our Mishnah. Right? In other words, this Braisa we just quoted is not Rabbi Akiva. This is the Rabbanan, the Chachamim. This disagree with Rabbi Akiva. But Rabbi Akiva in our Mishnah taught us this halacha. So the Gemara says, actually, where do we see that this is what Rabbi Akiva holds? Do you see it from Rabbi Akiva in the Mishnah? Hi, Rabbi Akiva. Where did Rabbi Akiva say this? Is it Rabbi Akiva here that we had before in the Mishnah? The Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah Rabbi Akiva. You soak your bread and water. So now you have enough to put together a kazayis of Isser here. Chayev, you'll be chayev. That's what Rabbi Akiva says. Now you could learn the pshat in the Mishnah that what he's saying is even if you don't have a kazayis of Isser, but together with the bread, you have a half a kazayis bread and a half a kazayis of the wine, you're still going to be chayev. That's how I will understand what Rabbi Akiva said in the Mishnah. On that the Gemara says, from the lashon of the Mishnah itself, you have no raya. This is what Rabbi Akiva was saying. Umimai, how do you know? Dilma, maybe the way to read the Mishnah is, the Bachir says, V'hu, the Ike Kazayis Miyayin, that you have over here a Kazayis of the wine Luchadei on its own. You don't have, or in the argument it says, Who the Ike Kazayis be, that the Mishnah is saying a case where he soaked the wine, the bread and the wine, and there is actually a full kazayis of the wine itself. How do you know? In the Mishnah it's saying that you only have a half a kazayis of wine and a half a kazayis of the bread and you combine them. If you'll argue and say, so Maila Memra. If so, what's the Chiddush in what Rabbi Akiva is saying? You have a kazayis of wine, for sure it's also. So the Gemara says, no, the Chiddush here is something else. Tanakama says that with a kazayis of wine, it's not enough. You're not chayiv yet for eating from this. You have to have a revius, which is more, a revius of wine in order to be chayiv. That was the main machlokes in the Mishnah between Rabbi Akiva and the Tanakama. But who says, where do you see in the actual words of Rabbi Akiva in the Mishnah that you could be mitzarev the bread itself to the Isser? So the Gemara brings a Braisa. Says the Gemara, Ela Rabbi Akiva the Braisa. We see this clearly in the words of Rabbi Akiva in the Braisa. The Tanya, Rabbi Akiva Oimer. Nazir shashara pita b'yayin. A Nazir that soaked his bread and wine. V'achal kazayis mi pas umiyayin. So the Braisa clearly says he ate a kazayis, and the kazayis is made up of bread and wine. So then chayev will be chayev. So here the Braisa clearly says that this is a situation where you have a combination. The kazayis is coming from the bread and the wine together. So this is the heter and the isser that are mitzvah together. This is the opinion of Akiva.
So regular wine, you need a revius.
For other yisurim, or for
how much
what?
Wine is that? He drank plain wine. How much wine is that?
Kazayis. Now Rabbi Akiva holds. No, there is a kazayis in wine. There is a way how to measure kazayis for a wine, even though it's usually a measurement that we use for solids, not for liquids. But over here, when you get to Nazir, he says the shear is a kazayis, which is a bigger chumrah, not only a revius. Always by a Nazir, the shear is a kazayis. Not only when he soaked it in bread, because now the wine went into a solid, into a bread. B'chlal, the shear is always a kazayis. Okay, the way you actually measure it is you take a kazayis, you put it into a cup of wine, and whatever amount of wine comes out from the cup when you put in that zayis inside, that's a kazayis. That's how you measure it. Okay, so we have our machlokes now what the taich of mishras is. Either we learn out from mishras that if you soak a grape in water, for example, then the water got a taste, that the taste of water is going to ask the whole water for the nazir. That's the Chachamim's pshat, and Rabbi Akiva's pshat is that you mitzarev heter to isser. If you soak bread in wine, even if not the whole entire bread was soaked in the wine, so you have a part of the bread which is still completely mutter, and then doesn't even have the taste of the wine. But you could be mitzarev the bread together, heter with isser together. So he asked him a question. According to Rabbi Akiva's pshat, he understands that what is the b'chol mishras in the Torah teach me leheter mitzaref leisser, that you could combine a heter to a isser to be chayev by a nazir litin tam keiker minole, From where would Rabbi Akiva learn out this concept that if you have the taste itself, that the taste is also like the ikir itself? The reason the Gemara is assuming that this is what Rabbi Akiva holds is because what's a bigger chiddush? To say that the tam is aser, or to say that you mitzaref the heter? To say that you mitzaref the heter is a much bigger chiddush. So if Rabbi Akiva wouldn't have had a source from another place that the tam is aser, he wouldn't have been mechadish that mishras is going on this new halacha of combining the heter to iser. He must have had a source from somewhere else that the tam is aser. And therefore now when he comes to B'chol Mishras, he's mechadish a new chiddush that the heter is mitzaref to the iser. So where's the source? Where did he learn out that the tam, the taste, is also like the ikir itself? And so the Gemara Yalef mi basa b'chalav. He learns it out from the iser of basa b'chalav, milk and meat. Lav tam ba'al muhu. Over there, when you have the mixture of milk and meat, isn't it just a taste that gets mixed in? And v'aser, and it'll be aser. So too regarding other isurim, I learned from there that even just a taste will also be aser. So the pshat over here in the Gemara is not so pashut, because why is the Gemara saying that when you have a mixture of milk and meat, that it's only the tam that gets mixed in? It's not just the tam. You have the mamoshes, you have the actual milk and meat itself that mixes, and you have milk itself inside the meat, or the meat itself inside the milk. So some say that it's with Mashma and Rashi and Psachim, that when you have the milk that gets absorbed in the meat, so now once it's absorbed inside of it, so you can't see any mamashas anymore. Once it's balua, it's absorbed, so all you have is the taste of the milk inside the meat, but the mamashas of the milk, you won't notice it anymore. That's one shot. But others argue with that. Others say, true, it's balua, you don't notice it anymore, but the fact is, there is milk, actual milk that's absorbed inside the meat. So others say that the pshat is the opposite. What happens if you have meat that came in contact with the milk, or was cooked together with the milk, but there's no actual piece of the basar that's inside the milk? If you now want to drink that milk, the only mixture of the milk and the meat that was cooked together is the fact that you have a taste of the basar inside the milk, but the milk itself has zero mamashas of the basar in it. The basar remains intact without mixing inside the milk itself. And still the Torah says if you cook it together, it's going to be aser. So that's the source where you see that the taste itself in this mixture brings about the iser. So this is where Rabbi Akiva learned it out, the Kol HaTorah Kula. So the Gemara now explains. The Rabbana did not want to learn out from there. They say, Mi basa b'chalav loy gabrinan. I can't learn out from the mixture of basa b'chalav. Why not? The chidushu, because basa b'chalav is a kind of iser which is a novelty. So you can't compare from there. You can't learn from there to the rest of Yisurim and Torah. Gemara explains, my chidushe, what is the chidush of basa b'chalav? If you'll say the chiddush is the the milk itself and the meat itself, shari, you're allowed to eat. When you mix them together, two things that are mutter become now aser. That itself is the chiddush. Usually other isurim in the Torah, it's aser for itself. Says the Gemara, that's not a unique chiddush by basa b'chalav. Klayim nami, it's the same thing with klayim. If you plant a vineyard separately, shari is allowed to eat from it. And if you plant other plants separately, shari they're also allowed. But if you plant them together and they're mixed, they become asa. So it's the same concept. So it's not a chiddush specifically by basa b'chalav. So Ella, the Gemara says, the chiddush is something else. Basa b'chalav, the itarule kuli yayme b'chalbe. If you're going to soak milk and meat together the entire day, and once you soak it, this is what's usually called in other places kavush. It's like soaked and pickled. It absorbs one from another. It's a real mixture. But nevertheless, shari, still it's going to be mutter. But but if you cook it together, then asa. Only then will it be asa. So this is a novelty. By other isurim, if you have an iser that's soaked in something which is mutter, the kavush itself creates an iser because it absorbs. But by basa b'chalav, milk absorbing meat or meat absorbing the milk is not an iser. Only if it's cooked, then it's an iser. So I see that this is a unique chiddush that you find only by basa b'chalav. So therefore, I can't learn from here this rule that the taste itself causes an iser.
So people could actually do that stuff?
No. This is all speaking about min ha-Torah. Min ha-Torah, okay? Don't get any ideas. Okay, so the Gemara, so Rabbi Akiva nami, so how could we say that Rabbi Akiva learns out from here? Basa b'chalav chidushu. Basa b'chalav, as we just pointed out, is different. It's a novelty. So how could you learn from here the halacha of tam kike? Ella, the Gemara says you're right. We learn it out from a different place according to Rabbi Akiva. Yalef migi ule oivdei kechavim. What we learned this out is from the halacha of Kiyulei of the Kechavim, when you have pots and pans that were used by a guy, and he cooked in it non-kosher foods. And so then you have to kasher it in order to get out. Giyule means to take out the non-kosher taste that there is inside these pots. And this is the story that it says there in the parasha when the Yidden went into war with the Midian, and then they brought back all the different spoils, and it was pots and pans as well. And over there the pasuk says, anything that was cooked with, it was used in fire. So what do you have to do in order to take out the taste of the non-kosher food? You have to put it into fire, to kasher, to take it out. So this is teaching me that the giyulei of the kechavim, what's absorbed in the pot, you have to bring out by kashering it. So the Gemara explains that, how do we learn out from there that this concept of tam ke'eker isn't over here. When you're talking about the taste that's inside the pot, there's no mamoshes, there's no actual isser that's here. It's just a taste of the isser that was cooked in the pot and gets absorbed in the walls of the pot. And v'aser, and it's also to use it. You have to kasher it before you use it. So from here we learn out to all other isurim that even if there's just a taste alone of the isser, it'll be aser. This is the source of tam ke'ikir according to Rabbi Akiva. Now the Rabbanan that don't want to learn out from there, they learn it out from the word mishras that it says by Nazir. So nami tepik lahu migulei v'kechavim. Why do they not want to learn it out from this halacha of what gets absorbed in the pots that you buy from a guy? Amalei, so the Rabbana will answer you, Hasam Chidushu. There as well, this is also a unique novelty that you can't learn out from there. Why? What's usually the halacha in all of Torah? Naisen tam livgam mutter. Even something, a isser, that gives a taste of the isser, but if the taste that it gives is not a good taste, it's a tam that it's paigim, it actually gives a bad taste, or it doesn't give any good taste. And when is that? When the taste is there absorbed in the pot more than 24 hours, it's not the taste from that very day, so the taste that's there is already old and it's not fresh, it's not a good taste. So usually the halacha is mutter. If it's a nice and tam livgam, if it's a bad taste or it's not a good taste, then it's mutter. That's not a taste that's aser. But v'gabe giyulei v'kechavim, here when it comes to the pots and pans you buy from a guy that cooked in it, aser. Even though it was already a long time and it's the taste that it has absorbed in the walls of the pot is not a good taste, still it's going to be aser. So I see that this halacha of kashering the pots you take from a guy is a unique chiddush. So I can't learn out from there that this halacha of the tam being aser for kol ha'Torah kula. Fragt the Gemara or Rabbi Akiva nami. So according to Rabbi Akiva as well, it's taka chiddush. How does he learn out from there? Rav Huna bar Chia answers, Rabbi Akiva holds actually that chiddush is not applied there. Over there, when Rabbi Akiva says in the story by Midian, when they had to kasher the pots and pans, it's because it could have been used on that very day by the goyim to cook in it. How's that possible? How's it possible? I mean, the chayra on that very day, they just brought it in, and then there was a whole thing how they split it up. In the story, it doesn't seem like that on that very day, the Goyim, the Midianites, cooked in it. So some of Farshim say that when they captured all these things, they also captured from the Noshim, the women and children from the Midianites as well. And they still had their pots and pans with them, and they were cooking with it even after the war was over, and they were still cooking with it. So it's possible that they cooked with it on that very day, and therefore only then the taste is still fresh, and therefore the Chiddush does not apply in a case where it's nice and tam levgam. So therefore you could learn out from there. The Rabbanan disagree with this because they say Kedeira Basyoime, the taste that's absorbed in the walls of a pot, even from that very day, Nami Pogma Porta. It's impossible that the taste is a little bit, it loses its original freshness of the taste when it's absorbed in the pot. True, it's not like after 24 hours where it's totally pogum, where it doesn't have that taste at all. But even over here, within the same day, the taste is already pogum, and therefore the taste that's absorbed in the walls of a pot should not cause any problem. The fact that the Torah says you have to kasher these kalim, even though it is pogum to some extent, is considered to be a novelty, it's a chiddush, and therefore you can't learn out from here the rule of tam ke'eker. Okay, that's the conclusion of this discussion. So basically the point is we see here there's a machlekes between Rabbi Akiva and the Rabbanan whether we have another source for this idea of tam ke'ikr from Giyulei Ovdei Kechavim, and therefore that brings about the machlekes regarding Mishras. When it says by Nazir Mishras, Rabbi Akiva says, I already have another source that the taste is aser. So Mishras is teaching me an even greater chiddush, that even a heter, that something which is permitted, could be mitzdaref, could combine with the iser. But the Rabbanan say, no, I don't have another source for tam kekir, so I learned that out from here, from the pasuk that it says Mishras. Another question now on Rabbi Akiva. Shouldn't we learn out from what Rabbanan said, what they learn out from Mishras, that the similar should be according to Rabbi Akiva? What is he asking? Didn't the Rabbanan say that, hi Mishras, what do we learn out from this word Mishras by Nazir? Litin tam kekir, that the taste is also like the ikir. But then the Braisa said even more. This becomes now a source for all other Yisurim in the Torah that a taste is also like the ikir. So if so, Rabbi Akiva nami, according to Rabbi Akiva as well, the kamaikim le'lahai mishras lahetem mitzdaref le'isr. He says that tam kikir have a different source. So what do I learn out from Mishras to tell me that I combine what's mutter to what's aser? But if so, I should also say, shall we say, that from here I learn out regarding all Yisurim in the Torah as well, that the same applies. The Gemara before said it's a kal v'chaimer, that I can learn from Nazir, which is a more lenient Isser, to other Yisurim in the Torah. Why would I not say the same according to Rabbi Akiva? This is going back to the beginning of the whole sugya, that Rabbi Yechanan said that this concept of hetem mitzdaref le'isser is only by Nazir and not by anything else. Why? Amalei. So Rav Ashi answered, Mishum dahavi Nazir v'chatos beis ksuvim abon kechad. Because this chiddush of the mitzaref, the heter to the isser, you find here by Nazir, but you also find it in another place by chatos, as the Gemara will bring now. And therefore, these are two psukim that are saying the same halacha. And the rule is, if the Torah repeats the same halacha twice, so you can't learn out from there to anywhere else in the Torah. If the Torah meant it to become a rule to learn out to all other places, so it could just say it once. Why is it saying it twice? Saying it twice to tell you that it's only here and not anywhere else. If the Torah writes the same halacha in one and a second place, you don't learn it out to anywhere else. So where do we see that the Torah writes this halacha of heter mitzdaref le'isser twice? Nazir hadamara. Nazir is the source that we're discussing the entire time here. We learn out from Mishras that the heter is mitzdaref le'isser. Chatos ma'i. Where do we see by a korban chatos that there's this concept of heter combining to the isser? Says the Gemara, the Tanya. We learned in the Braise, kol asher yiga b'psara yiktosh. That is, the Torah says regarding a korban chatos, you have the basar, the meat from a korban chatos. Any food that touches this korban chatos will get the same status as the meat of the chatos itself. Now the Braise explains how and when does that apply. Yachal, I would think, afilu shaloi bala. If you have a piece of food that touched the meat of the chatas, even if it absorbed nothing of the korban chatas, I would say just the touching itself, it would become like the chatas itself. Tamud loima bibsara. So the pasuk says yiga bibsara. So bibsara means that it absorbed from the basa something. Achi yivla bibsara has to absorb some juice or something from the basa of the chatas yiktosh. Then it becomes sanctified, holy, like the chatas itself, liyos kamaya, to be like the chatas itself. What does that mean? She'im psula, if this basar of the korban chatas was from a korban chatas that was shechted, and it's pasul, let's say it became pigul, or whatever psul it had, so then, psula he, if it is pasul, you pasul. So then another piece of basar that touches the korban chatas becomes pasul like the korban chatas itself, and it has to be burnt like the korban chatas itself. Ve'im ksheira, if this piece of the basar of the korban chatas is a kosher piece of chatas that the kohen can eat, or the bailam can eat, or the kohen can eat, so then toichal k'chomishaba. So then this piece of basar that absorbed a little bit from the chatas will have the same halacha as the korban chatas. You can eat the korban chatas only in the Beis Hamikdash and only for one day and one night. The same halacha will apply to whatever food touched it. Now, what do you see from here? The Gemara doesn't spell it out. So the Gemara is saying that from here you see the concept of heter mitzdaref le'isser. Why? Because you have, let's say, a piece of meat which is not like the chatas, and then it absorbed a little bit of the meat into this other piece here. How much did it absorb? Let's say it absorbed a half a kazayas, a little bit. But then you have the rest of the piece of food here. It's only absorbed a little bit, not a lot. It didn't absorb a complete kazayas, but nevertheless I say that it becomes completely like the chatas itself. And now the heter part of this piece of food here and the isser part, which it absorbed from the chatas, combined together, and the whole thing gets the status like the chatas. So I see this concept that the absorption of a little bit of it and the whole heter becomes like the Isser, meaning that a heter is mitzdaref to the Isser, that the whole thing becomes Aser. So therefore I have this concept of heter mitzdaref le-Isser by the Nazir and also by a Chatos. So these are two psukim and I can't learn out from here. Says the Gemara, the Rabbanon that disagree, the Rabbanon that hold that I do learn out from the pasuk of Mishras that it says b'negei to Nazir. From here I learn out to Kol HaTorah Kula. How did the Rabbanan say that you learn out from here to Kol HaTorah Kula? L'chayre you have over here two psukim that shnei ksuvim abom keachot. So how could you learn out from here? Or again, 1 second. The Gemara is really asking that according to the Rabbanon, you should say that you have to have this pasuk over here of this pasuk that it says over here b'negei to Nazir. It should have to come and teach me this halacha of nutam ke'ikir, right? The Rabbanon said that you learn out tam ke'ikir. So according to the Rabbanon, why can't you say that the side the pasuk over here b'negei to Nazir is teaching me tam ke'ikir, and that by Karban Chatos maybe it's also teaching me the halacha of tam ke'ikir, that only if the whole thing got to tam, then I therefore I can't learn out from here to Kol HaTorah Kula. So the Gemara answers tzrichi. Even if you're going to tell me that both over here, b'negei to Nazir, it's teaching me the halacha of tam ke'ikir, and also by the case of the Chatos, it's teaching me the halacha of tam ke'ikir, but still, I could learn out from here to Kol HaTorah Kula. Why? Because if the Torah would only say the halacha of tam ke'ikir, b'negei to Chatos, havamine, then I would say Nazir le'asimine. I can't learn out Nazir from a Chatos. Mishum de Nazir mekotchim le'alfinan. Because you can't learn out Nazir. Nazir is kotchim. Kotchim it has much higher level and much more stringent. So how could you learn out Nazir from kotchim? And on the other hand, if the Torah would write the halacha only by Nazir, the halacha of tam ke'ikir only by Nazir, havamine, so then I would say mi Nazir lo yalfinon. I can't learn out just from Nazir alone. Mishom the chomer isure, because by Nazir I find that the isur of Nazir is more stringent. There's a stringency by Nazir that I don't find in other places, and what that is the hafile chartzon osirle. That even the chartzon, what is chartzon? Chartzon is either the seeds or the grape skins. Then even the seeds or the grape skins will be aser. So hilkach le'asimine. So therefore I can't learn out from Nazir alone to the chatos. So the Rabbanan say this concept of shnei ksuvim abam kechad that you can't learn out from there is only if the two psukim are both. It's not necessary to write both. The Torah could have written it one time. So why is the Torah repeating it? It's only repeating it to teach you that you shouldn't learn out from here. But if these two psukim, each one cannot be learned out from each other, so the Torah had to write one and the other, it's still no proof that I can't learn out from here. So basically, according to the Rabbanon, I learn out from Nazir and the Chatos together that in the rest of Torah, the same halacha of tam ke'ikir applies. This is what's known usually in the Gemara as the tzad hashava. Even though Nazir and Chatas are different, they don't have the same stringencies, but nevertheless, Hatzad, Hashav, Shebehan, they both have the same halacha of Tam Ke'ikir. And from here I learn out, the Kol HaTorah Kula, that Tam Ke'ikir. So before the Gemara said, that the Braisa said before, the Rabbanan say that you learn it out from Nazir. Now it comes out that according to the Rabbanan, you would learn it out from both, from Nazir and Chatas together. Now the Gemara explains, Rabbi Akiva disagrees with this. Rabbi Akiva will tell you, why are you telling me that the Torah had to write both, Nazir and Chatas? He does agree to half of what the Rabbanan say. Yes, it is true, Ikas of Rachmana Chatas, if the Torah would only write the halacha of by Chatas, and according to Rabbi Akiva, we're learning out from Chatos the halacha of heter mitzdaref le'isser. If the Torah would only write this halacha regarding a Chatos, legama nazimine. So you're right. You can't learn out a nazir from a Chatos. Why? The chulin mikachim legamrinan. I can't learn out nazir, which is chulin from kachim. But Ella, on the other hand, lichtav rachmana ben nazir v'teisi Chatos minay. That I disagree with you. The Torah could write the halacha only by a nazir, and I would learn out Chatos from there. The ha call isurin shebetayre kagamri min nazir. We find already in other places that we learn out all isurin from the Torah from a nazir. In other words, as Rishonim explained, the Chachamim disagree with this chumrah that the Gemara said before, that nazir you can't learn out from nazir because it's more chomer, because even the grape seeds or the grape skins are also. That's not considered to be a chumrah. It's a halacha by nazir, but it doesn't show on any specific chumrah. For example, the fact that by nazir there's a halacha that he's not allowed to cut his hair. that's going to show you in a specific chumrah that's more than any other place. That's what a Nazir is. That's the Isser of a Nazir. So therefore Rabbi Akiva disagrees with this chumrah. So therefore he says you could learn out from Nazir to other places. And the whole halacha of bittul b'shishim, that's what the Mefarish brings here. From where do you know that when something is batal b'shishim, it becomes mutter? It's learned out from a Nazir. We'll see later in the Gemara. So you could learn out from a Nazir. That's not a problem. So therefore, he says the Torah could have written this halacha only by a Nazir. It wrote it by a Nazir and a Chata. So therefore, you can't learn out from here. Now the Gemara continues and says, "V'Rabbanan." What will the Rabbanan answer to this? In other words, even if the Rabbanan will accept what Rabbi Akiva just said, that the Torah could write the halacha just by a Nazir, and from there you could learn out. So why is the Torah writing the halacha twice, a Nazir and a Chatos? And the Rabbanan say that you learn out from here to Kol HaTorah Kula. How do you learn out from here? Rabbanan will tell you that really it's these two psukim are teaching me two different things. Chatos lehetem mitzarav le'isr. What do you learn out from Chatos? By Chatos you don't learn out tam ke'ikir. By Chatos you learn out the halacha of hete mitzarav le'isr. Okay, in other words, Gemara is now saying that even though regarding a Nazir, the Rabbanan disagree with Rabbi Akiva. By a Nazir, Rabbanan hold there's no such a thing of hetem mitzaref le'isr. Because Mishras by Nazir means the halacha of tam ke'ikir. And but by Chatos they'll agree to Rabbi Akiva. By Chatos, when it says there in the Torah that if it absorbs from the basar of the Chatos that it'll be aser, it means that it absorbed only partially and there's still heter, and the heter is mitzaref le'isr. Over there by the halacha of Chatos, just like Mishras, there's two ways how to teach what Mishras means. Either it's soaked to the extent that you have the taste in the whole water or in the whole bread, or there could be Mishras teaching me that there's a heter that's still there and it's mitzaref le'isr. It's the same by Chatos. When it says that there's the basar that absorbed from another basar of the Chatos, it could either mean that it absorbed completely and the tam is in the entire basar, or it can mean an oifen of heter mitzaref le'isr. So the Rabbanan will tell you as follows. By Chatos, what is it coming to teach me? Hetem mitzaref le'isr. And v'chulim mekatshim le'gamrinon. And therefore I don't learn out to any other isurim that this concept applies. This is only by kachim, and you can't learn out chulim from this. That's the opinion of the Rabbanan, that even by Nazir, there's no such a thing of hetem mitzaref le'isr. Mishras, what does the pasuk Mishras come to teach me? Litin tam keker. It's coming to teach me that if the taste is fully absorbed in everything, like in the water or even in the bread, so from there you learn out litin tam ke'ikir, and mikan atadon l'chol yisunim shebetayre. And from Nazir I learn out to all yisunim shebetayre. As the Gemara explained before already, according to Rabbi Akiva, according to the Rabbanan. According to the Rabbanan, there is no other source for litin tam ke'ikir. This is the source, and from here I learn out to Kol HaTorah Kula. And there's no shnei ksuvim, because Chatos is to teach me the halacha of hetem mitzaref le'isr, and Nazir is to teach me the halacha of tam ke'ikir. But Rabbi Akiva disagrees. Rabbi Akiva says, Tarvayu lehetem mitzaref le'isr. Both of these psukim, both Chatos and Nazir, are teaching the halacha of hetem mitzaref le'isr, because we already said before, according to Rabbi Akiva, the halacha of litin tam ke'ikir, we learned that from Giyulei Oivdei Kechavim. So therefore, v'havalu shnei ksuv ma'bam ke'echad. So these are two psukim that are saying the same thing. V'chol shnei ksuv ma'bam ke'echad ein malamde. And when you have two psukim saying the same thing, I can't learn out from here. So that's the difference between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Akiva.